I just wanted to share as a quick overview. And Ian was very kind to introduce me as the AI genius. But I think if you're looking at the rapid deployment scenario that we're looking with COVID, there is a significant part of our AI capability and the fairly, decent 100+ engineers that are running this behind me. But we also have a world-class team across the ocean for where I'm at right now in the US who are legacy analysts in the world of contact tracing. And we also have a gentleman on the call with us who has built the front end specifically around contact tracing and the use cases that we'll show you today. So you're getting a little bit of different worlds together because we are facing, a deployment challenge in terms of speed. We are facing an automation channel because, 1,000 infections an hour in a certain country, you can't sit there and, call the cops and do an investigation on somebody's phone records. And then lastly, we're looking at different capabilities that need to be fielded from geospatial, online to offline, to analytics, to AI, to even the biggest challenge being, you have 250 billion GPS points, but you need them at a fingertips speed to run through a number of algorithms that make sense of a pattern of life of a city. So it's, that's why we have a lot of people on the call, because we've brought together for this, let's call it, for lack of a better term, our task force here, a lot of different talents and expertise together to bolt a universal solution into this. We've simplified it a little bit, and I thank you for helping along with that. So I won't bore you with the deck all over again. I just want to sort of from a top level give you that simplification, and then, in one slide we can stop. But basically, we have now segregated 3 layers of capability that each one may represent a point of interest. Of course, if you sandwich them together, it is one tech stack that is working now. And we're starting with, at the very top, being able to drop a square or a circle on a map and being able to extract sentiment and behaviors on the ground inside that square or circle. That sentiment could be what are people watching on Netflix, all the way to who's having a persistent cough, fever, or nausea right now. So we, as the core AI, which has its legacy in behavioral forensics and digital media, we are very good at picking any country in the world and virtually any conceivable behavior or sequence of actions, and we can measure that. Now, enter COVID-19. It's great to know there's 6 people out there. You can turn on CNN to know that we're not changing the world by knowing this, even if we have more forensics than anybody. So the second layer, and this is where we brought in a lot of partnership expertise of a business that we have that's domiciled in the US for non-advertising purposes. And we are combining the AI as an automation foundation with a lot of capability around contact tracing and network tracing. And by network tracing, we mean patient X is on the ground, asymptomatic, running around having fun, and you have 300 people 7 days later that are infected. And again, these 300 people are talking to another 300 people or in, physical convergence with. So this is where the curve flattening, is detected in real time. And the last layer is basically our countermeasure. Given that there's limited healthcare resources on the ground in any country right now, we've built, using our global digital media infrastructure, a process where we can send in real-time customized audience of one emergency messages. And just, before we jump in the demo, I'll just show you what a message like this looks like. Basically, you have, at a certain point in time, you may have been near a person that is a confirmed COVID-19 case. Please click here to immediately speak to a healthcare worker or to schedule for a test in the closest clinic near you. So we're rolling out different call to action apertures. You can touch the message and speak to somebody. You can share the message socially with people that were with you at that moment in time that, may have not come through the contact tracing. Or you can directly render yourself for testing or any other call to action that a client government may want to pursue. That message can be placed across 3.5 billion websites, 7 million apps, but only viewable to the person that we're uniquely targeting. So if I'm positive and you're negative and we're both reading the front page of the New York Times, I'm going to see that red blinking square and you won't. That's the power of this. So this allows us to basically try to deploy a rapid execution countermeasure before even limited resources on the ground can act. We can start counter messaging and try to, for lack of a better term, herd the cats towards a common point where resources are available to test them or to quarantine them. If that all makes sense so far.
Absolutely.
Now, we've got tons of dashboards that, in different countries are digitally identifying symptomologies on the ground, treatment patterns, healthcare practitioners, hospital resources, supply chains, state of mind of people under lockdown, all of that, which I can show you at the end. But I think what would make it most interesting, if I walk you through some real scenarios that we have done in South Africa, where we are doing contact tracing, to show you how this works. We're going to do it manually. The majority of this is automated, but you'll see step by step what the logic is and how it gets executed. So just very quickly to show you, and this is the back end, this is not the actual platform, but this gives you an idea of, we have in a country like South Africa, we're tracking about 65 million unique devices. That's more than the total population because, it's in a strange way more than one device per person in this country. And from a data call-up perspective, what I can do is I can just right-click and now just draw a circle somewhere or a polygon, and I select the time. This is 1 hour, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. on March 17th. And all I'm going to do now is pick up every device that was active in that little square outside of Johannesburg. Now, this is very cumbersome and very slow because it's the production servers in the cloud are feeding into a different platform that I'll show you in a minute. But just to validate for you, we've got the data. This is not smoke and mirror. This is real time now. And we can pull every single device, every app, everything that a person was doing when they were on the ground in that hour. And from there onwards, we can start now looking at what we call bed down points. Where are they sleeping? What is their movement through the streets, neighborhoods? What locations do they spend a lot of time in? What other devices do they converge with? And it's not me passing you on the street while I'm on a bus and you're outside, on the phone, but is where do I have a social convergence with another device that would indicate I'm actually potentially infecting that individual if I'm a person of interest. So now I've loaded. Here we go. So this is that hour. You can see somebody's driving through. There's other devices. We can zoom in and you can start seeing all the data is there. If we now go and look at a whole 24-hour cycle, it looks like a confetti box or an ant farm, whatever you want to call it. You realize the need for automation to make sense of it. Now, what I'll do now, and I can show you, how we're pulling this data and slicing and dicing it, but what I'd like to just quickly show you a real-world scenario. We were given this in real time. So here's an individual by the name of Judith Jabalala. And Judith was diagnosed in South Africa on the 24th of March with corona. 37 years old. She has self-declared an address, or at least that's where, according to the South African government, her phone bill is going to. Here's her job, self-declared. She's got a spouse, and there is a Google Maps estimation of where her place of residence is. That's our entry point. A lot of governments will say, we'll give you device IDs, or we can triangulate this using telco. The truth of the matter is, in a real-world deployment, you're going to end up getting the address if you're lucky. Because nobody today anywhere is prepared to start picking up device IDs in clinics and, mobile testing centers and all that stuff. So I'll just quickly switch screens. And what we'll show you now is how we start at a 30,000 foot level. So we have been given an address. We assume Judith may be living there, but we have no evidence so far. So the very first step is we go back in time as far as we can. And what you see here now is different colors, which is these are all the devices that in the last 12 months have visited Judith. Have spent, not somebody driving by. I mean, this could again look like a confetti box, but these are devices that have spent a noticeable, socially convergent amount of time at the Judith residence. And what's immediately apparent is one of the light blue ones, if you zoom in a little bit, you basically see the light blue one actually turns out to be the neighbor from across the street who also visits the residence regularly. And now if we narrow it down to the point of 10 days of symptoms or 14 days of symptoms prior to Judith's formal diagnosis or potential symptoms, or where she was a carrier, we'll now see Yellow is what we presume to be Judith. That's a device that is in the residence 24/7 and doesn't appear to be leaving after diagnosis. But the neighbor and one other individual have visited her despite the fact that she's positive. That same neighbor, if we zoom back a little bit, is also continuing to move around the neighborhood into different friends' residences, whatever it is. They're going shopping with one of the devices that is also friends with Judith up on the upper part. And there's actually a social convergence that is algorithmically detected that shows you these devices actually have been in very close proximity for longer amounts of time in these two buildings. So staying true to the science, again, we're only making assumptions, but this does indicate that we have a potentially spreading risk of Judith's neighbor and Judith's common friend with a neighbor who continue to socially converge and visit her while she's been positive. So here's an example where right now, instead of hitting these 30 houses, the shopping center and the gas station across the street, we would start hitting these residences by location and by the devices that live in these residences with specific messages. Hey, between this and this time, you may have been near a person, and so on, as you've seen. This is the first level of countermeasure while local resources are being mobilized, however much of that may or may not be available, because you can see these devices are on the move, so you need full automation to go after everyone they've been in contact with. If you just look at the 7 days after diagnosis, how much activity there is on the ground.
Incredible. It's truly impressive.
Thank you. Now let me show you two other scenarios. These are very different. The next one here is, hang on, I'm going to go ahead and share quickly. Contact trace report number 2 here, which is a young individual who stays with his parents, works at a bank, 22 or 25 years old, address given here. Again, address has been located on Google Earth by the contact tracing center here. That was given to us. So the next step here now is, here's a scenario where you can see a massive disruption taking place in that residence following the diagnosis, and a nuanced difference that, you know, makes or breaks an aggressive or a non-aggressive response. And after that, we have a really bad case as a counterexample. So you're seeing this is Ruben Joe, Ruben's residence or his parents' residence right here. That whole block, it's a mansion. Ruben's family has a bit of a legacy local background. So if we zoom back, we're going to see a global travel history that is very, very unique, but there's some political sensitivities to that, so we don't highlight that. But the interesting thing here is there are basically two other devices as parents, a domestic servant. You can see there's a lot of African travel taking place, so some very unique places. But what's the interesting thing here is that prior to the point of diagnosis, there's what I'll introduce in a minute as what appears to be the security guards, the domestic, the parents, and Ruben. Now, as we're moving forward to the point where Ruben was diagnosed, what you'll see is an immediate collapse in the pattern of life, a rapid change in what you see there. No one's coming in the house anymore. If you really zoom in, you see the red dot, which we are expecting, because that dot doesn't move around the house, is probably the security guard at the entrance. And then you have Ruben and the parents. The purple one and the light pinkish one, which is the security guard, but the purple one and the blue one that were coming near the house on a regular basis, this could be a chef or somebody else or a maid or a friend, they've stopped coming. They're moving around town still, but they're no longer coming into the residence. With the exception of what we assume is a security guard, this family is locked down and they're complying with the quarantine. So this is a positive outcome. Now, the last scenario is a very, very bad outcome, which highlights how this stuff can, with patient 0, become a national situation. So we've had an individual that was traveling that owns a tourist lodge. And the wife was diagnosed. The husband refused to be tested. And the family ran out of the testing center and disappeared. local law enforcement, because that was one of the earliest, if not the first case in the country, deployed all resources, property records, phone bills, things like that, and they were able to identify the lodge as another possible location where they are, and lo and behold, the lodge was shut down, and the family was in the lodge. Now, you can see the perimeter of the lodge as we're going in. There are 3 devices. Now, Ryan, I think you're telling this story a little bit better, because there appears to be one other device that eluded law enforcement and wasn't at the testing center that continued to be around the family and the lodge. And this is where the situation escalated quite badly. Go ahead, Ryan.
So we had some insight to the date of which we think the diagnosis sort of became positive. And we can see the blue device still active there in the lodge area. But what becomes interesting is where else the blue device still has proceeded to go since that time. We can see a whole bunch of activity over here for this blue device. Most interestingly, down here, a lot of activity. This actually is a coal mine where this person is probably working, most likely. So what we then did here was said, okay, well, this person has broken sort of a quarantine or after infection time, been active here. Well, who else has been in this area in that same time frame? And so if we turn those on here for you, it's about 16 additional. Okay, and we are still within that time frame of March 14th to basically today. Okay, and so each color now is still a different device, and we're seeing now numerous other kind of key centers of gravity and areas where other members also present in the coal mine, with overlapping time with our person who's known to have been to the lodge with an infected person, and some of the areas that they're moving to. We can take this one step further, and with our pattern analysis, look for places where each of these is spending significant amount of time for us, right? Kind of compute those key areas. And now we can see some of those areas where each of these devices are spending significant amounts of time. There's our lodge, of course, where that should be no surprise to us. But other areas like, and this is our mine area here, but now we're seeing other towns and villages where we have devices spending significant amounts of time. So this looks to be a shopping mall, grocery store, some sort of a store. Our purple device here has been present 162 times total in this time frame. And so now you can start to see 1 turns into 15, now 15 turns into other locations where there's going to be high human interaction. And the risk can sort of spiral from here, which is why the next piece of this becomes especially important, where we can now go a little bit more proactive to reach out to these individuals.
And I think there's one interesting scenario, Ryan, where the residents, one of the devices went home with 4 other family members inside the house. And again, the social conversion there doesn't need to be measured because we're seeing 4 devices sitting on top of each other in the same room. So this is where, local resources, in this case, even at a national level by the scale on the map, cannot counter-move this. And that's where, there's a lot of people selling you geospatial intelligence and fancy dashboards, but this is where every one of these devices now can get a unique message in 2 minutes from now. And that's where we hope we can make a difference.
It's fantastic. I have a very basic question, which is how do you actually pick up these signals? Is it from pings from a phone through a regular telco tower, or how does that work? What's the tech behind it?
Very good question. So the unknown, unlike when you're watching CSI on television, cell phone towers are actually for these intents and purposes useless, because the accuracy, depending on how wide of the area, in a non-city area, you can have a margin of error of 15 kilometers on a cell phone tower. Now, there are some specialized probes in some markets like the US where this gets a little bit better. But the way we're doing this is we are, as a large ad tech player in the media space, connected to all the global media auctions in the world, where any app on any device that has a commercial link to digital media or a global, data vendors ecosystem is allowing bids on the data of their devices. So we are API'd in with a massive fire hose globally into these auctions where we are picking up this data wholesale because the data is made available for bidding for digital media. So, there are companies that are selling you data for, let's say, people that have been to a supermarket. Would you like to send them an ad? People that go to Starbucks 3 times a week. Somebody who's been in a Chevrolet dealership in the last 2 months. So there is a commercial market for this, and it's that same ecosystem where we have the ability to get that data wholesale, except our, deployment for it is we're taking all of it. We have the server infrastructure to process it, and in turn, put AI, and, that's another conversation. It's a loose term, but basically to put forensic self-learning pattern recognition on it that allows us, without training and teaching and machine learning, which takes too much time in this case, to have a real-time ability to make sense. So one critical component, and this is what most government counterparties don't understand, is you're not with your device 24/7. And even if you are, it's not always transmitting. So if we're getting 25% of a person's history in a day on a device, we need to get to a lot more than 25% to pick up social convergence, which means we're using AI to understand you've gone into a Starbucks. You're not driving with a bus to the Starbucks. You're in a closed space right now. So on an AI level, that pattern of life sense making allows us to go from 25 to 75% to now have a pretty good grasp on what is happening on the ground beyond just every single data point. And then the last piece that we're trying to make up for is, which is crowdsourcing it. We've seen you near a patient, or you have been potentially near a patient on Tuesday between 17:30 and 17:45. Anybody with you, please send them that message and get tested. Most people will react quite seriously to that. Some people won't, but it's better than nothing. So we can crowdsource potentially the other 25% that, of course, there is no foolproof solution in no world. Nobody has all the data in the world.
So I think what you mentioned, Renee, is it's very important for that to come out in simple terms in the presentation, because it's a critical differentiator relative to the other solutions in the market. And obviously, I'm not a specialist at all, but I would imagine that initial people that we will face off with before we get to their technical specialists. It's important that they understand how this is done and why your product is way better than some of the solutions that people are looking at the moment in these markets. That's point number one, which is just an observation. The second quick question that I have is there consistency of the volume of data that you get in different markets? So, for example, this appears to work very well in South Africa. Would you have access to that level of ad data in a Uganda or a Rwanda?
Ryan, would you drop a bubble on any country? We're going to ask you not to ask us to do North Korea and Iran, because that's probably
no,
not.
Of course not. Well, 1 out of 2, I would say, would actually actively seek your technology, but we don't want to go there. We can't go there. We can't go there. We don't want to go there, and the world is large enough for you to do wonderful things without having to go there. To be clear,
better than nothing. Yes.
Yes.
So we can go ahead and now pick a country and just drop a bubble on a major city, and you'll see how quickly that data exists. Now, truth be told, we will expand on that data from the back end, and it usually takes us about 24 hours to take it from, let's say, in some markets, 50% coverage to 80, 90% coverage. In other markets, we may already be at 90+% coverage. So, we can drop what we call dropping a bubble on virtually any spot in the world and see what's going on the ground. And I think Ryan will show you a quick example of that.
So where would you like to look?
Why don't we pick somewhere exotic? I mean, obviously in North America, this should be well, people will be very well plugged in. Why don't we take India, which is a huge market, which I would imagine is also very well plugged in, actually, given the preponderance of WhatsApp and social media and so on and so forth. But as an example.
Okay, India.
So here we have, so far I've already come back about 1,700 devices, 9,000 signals. for just going back about a week or so. More will likely start to come in.
This will take some time. We
Then
can let
within-
this run for the next hour.
Sure, that's okay. We don't obviously we don't need to do that. Gentlemen, I take your word for it. I can see, with great clarity that the power of the platform is there.
And so if we wanted to, for this section here,
Sorry, that's on my side.
now we can take, 10 devices that have signaled in this area here to look at each of those 10 individually. In just a moment, those will begin to load up.
And gentlemen, if you're buying from wholesale advertisement data providers, the data is anonymized, or it actually tells you who the people are behind it?
And so this is where we have to draw a line in the sand, because it's, everybody wants privacy and full contact details at the same time in a perfect world. So this data is anonymized because we are GDPR compliant. So the device is unique. We're not dropping cookies into devices or anything like that. But we do not know any PII on the person by design, because that opens up a whole massive, never going away compliance can of worms if we start pulling real names and things like that. Now, having said that, in the open source world, there are ways to possibly triangulate a device's activity with a social media account, because the device activity has a timestamp overlap, or there is a picture that's been posted with an exif file and a coordinate, So there are ways that we can say, let's put in, persistent cough and fever into social media, look at where in India that is coming up, and then start drilling in whether we can link it to some devices. That's just using the data. Using the AI, on the other hand, we have a whole nother world of inference that comes to life, because we can start to see there's a building that normally at 9 p.m., 75% of that city block is engaging in recreational app activity, and now it's 2% suddenly from 1 hour to the next, which means there's been something that happened on the ground. 50% are suddenly reading the news, and another 50% are not inside the residence. They're moving randomly about. So this is where, with pattern of life analysis, you can start mapping disruptions, whether they're medical, crime, weather, whatever it may be.
It's phenomenal. Hats off. Very powerful tool.
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I think we're kind of 40 minutes in, so thank you for your attention. Thank you, Ryan and team, for just really pulling this together so quickly. I mean, this didn't exist literally 10 days ago, maybe even 7 days ago. So this is good. So you've seen the demo, and hopefully you can see that.
And you've seen the dashboards, right?
Yeah.
I've seen the dashboards in the presentation. If we could have I'm mindful that we've been going for quite a while. If we could have a very quick look, just whilst you're on, it would be helpful.
Absolutely. So what we've done, and again, as we are right now in a reactive position, historically, we've used our behavioral forensic on an 18-month horizon. Understanding pattern of life, habits, things like that in areas around certain consumer journeys, B2B, whatever that may be. Now, in the world of Corona, looking at 18 months of pattern of life is a waste of time, because anything that started before 3 months ago is out the door. And for the foreseeable future, if ever, the world may never be the same again. So what we've now done is basically we've created a verbatim carbon copy of the platform. The workhorse is called Market Finder, and we've just, for lack of a better term, called this Market Insights, which allows us to do the same thing on a 90-day signal. So if I go quickly back to South Africa, we've created 3 target packages of behavioral metrics, what we call situational awareness, that's all COVID. National impact, which is all national responses, awareness, things like that. And economic impact is, what are people doing in their homes? and it's quite funny to see how the kitchen table breaking down and the dog crapping all over the place and the kids making noise suddenly becomes the single biggest stressors. Forget Corona. I'm going to jump out the window if this goes on much longer in lockdown. So you're starting to see some of those challenges that are happening in the average household. Now, if I just go into situational awareness, the second dashboard here goes through it city by city, province by province. It is 20 kilometers long. I'll do the quick one here, which gives you a national bird's eye view, and that same template can now be zoomed in on a city block, provided there's enough individuals on the ground, or a neighborhood or a region. So here, what we're looking at is anyone who in the last 90 days has interacted with anything around COVID-19. What are they doing? 46.59% of them are looking at complications. 22% rounded up are looking at effects, risk groups, signs and symptoms. So for example, if we're looking at effects, what effects are they looking at? So now the AI comes back and tells me, okay, here's an audit of all the effects that I've analyzed to come to this conclusion. As we go a little bit deeper, we're starting to look at, what are these groups? People with heart conditions. Are these individuals that are also looking at availability and channel access to their blood thinners or type 2 diabetes insulin shots, whatever it may be, right? Their HIV immunosuppressant. So here we're starting to look at, are there other comorbidities that we can link to this engagement? Are there signs and symptoms they're engaging? Going a little bit deeper, they're looking at the outbreak infection. They're looking at self-isolation, hand washing, surgical masks, wipes, where can I get them? So we're just breaking it down into how is this materializing and disseminating itself as information, as an event on the ground, awareness in different provinces by different cities, and then breaking it down.
Rene, how are you generating this data?
So this now goes beyond GPS. We're also tracking anonymized click traffic access to 3.5 billion websites, in-app activities to 7 million apps. Anything anonymized, not profile names, but on an anonymized API level, anything inside Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, social platforms. Now, if you're going to yahoo.com/health, that's great. But I don't know if you're looking at arthritis, sunburn, or, symptoms for corona. So what we also have is hundreds of thousands of web crawlers that go to these sites where we're seeing patterns, read the information, and programmatically make sense of it. Here's an individual looking at insulin shots availability or trying to make contact with their local clinic, and they're also looking at corona symptoms, which is, of course, the contextualization of the behaviors that we see is sometimes more important than the behavior itself, because otherwise you're just giving people web traffic wholesale as an analysis. So while this other piece is loading, I can give you an example of that. So this is Cape Town. Let me just put in COVID-19. So first step is, what are they accessing on COVID-19 in South Africa right now? And I can change the country here. So now it's going to give me the top elements that are being engaged. I'm going to restart this, but
yeah. So Rick, this is the basis of our other business, our kind of insights and kind of media buying business. So we have just in Japan over 300 clients, and the rest of the world 100 large multinationals like Mercedes and Johnson Johnson, GSK, OCBC Bank, where we're running insights, media buying, and a whole series of other products. And all we've done is we've taken everything you've seen today along with the geospatial map and actually merged them together into one platform and integrated them using AI. So we have a mixture of GPS, that behavioral data, social data, and then, as Rene said, we don't necessarily have everybody's movements 24/7 in a nice linear fashion. So the AI engine is using all these different data sources that we have to plug in the gaps. So we've pulled together all the different, if you like, data resources, intelligent data that we've had, and merged them onto one platform for this contact tracing, which kind of makes it, I think, a little bit more unique, because we're bringing behavioral data, GPS data, and then kind of social data to merge around, device IDs, which could be at risk or we should be contacting. And then what's pretty cool is we can then, through our ad tech stack, contact each of them. So we've kind of pulled it all together, I guess, in about 10 days, Rene, maybe less than that.
Yeah, and we
integrated it all.
And here's a really interesting thing that sort of shows you the power of this. We've got, people are fantasizing about going camping when this is all over. They're worried about the insurance coverage, life insurance, health insurance, investments being wiped out, social concerns, political governance, crime and security. They're worried about losing their job, career. They are drinking more than they normally drink, fantasizing about going out to buy a cake. They want to go travel again as soon as this is over. Every guy is looking at dream cars right now while under lockdown. Now, here's an interesting thing, facial care. We actually, for the South African government, took these behaviors and sent these people messages with resources to Corona. The problem the government had was that 0.1% of people that are seeing an ad in the media on what the government's doing right now are clicking on it, 0.13%. So what we did is we messaged these people that we're seeing in quarantine, engaging both Corona as well as other things. And we sent them a message that intercepts them when they're looking at face cream, at camping and all of that with the government message. Now, here's the interesting thing. We got a 4.76% engagement rate versus the government's 0.11. We went into and we built these things, interested in outdoor activities, looking to expand life insurance, organizing grocery purchases, looking at their healthcare coverage, looking at updates on COVID, managing children during lockdown. All of these moments, you can see how massive the engagement is, 20, 30, up to 100 times more than what the government was able to do with the largest media agency in the country here. So this shows you the power and accuracy of this is when you hit somebody at the right time. And we sent them an interactive message, here's a picture of it, that tells them a little bit about COVID at home. And it then gives them an app that our ad server virtualizes that allows them to access news updates on lockdown in different regions, stay at home, don't go there, we've had an outbreak there, here's resources, and so on. So this became a channel. It's still running now, but it became a standalone channel that now communicates for the government into the population.
It's incredible. Very powerful stuff.
Thank you. If you just quickly like to see that, how quickly the AI learns in real time. So all I need to do right now is put in COVID-19. Now, first step is, what are people reading topic-wise? Okay? So make that 200 topics. Give me the 200 top topics they're reading about COVID-19 in South Africa. We'll take these topics. I don't care. Don't have the time to make sense of it. Next step, make sense of it for me. Now it reads every single article and comes back and tells me what are the key elements in this. Give it another second. Now, these are the key elements, doorknob, sanitizer, that they're reading about. Let's look at locations. Now it's learning in real time the locations. These are the locations around where the outbreaks are being listened to, are being looked at. Now, what we can do, go back to the generics, is, I still don't care. Make sense of me for me. I need a real-time ontology right now. So what the next step is, it's now going to sort this into targeting or messaging clusters automatically. I'm just setting it up to run quickly so we don't have to wait for 3 minutes. And what we'll get back now is an ontology on what these different articles engagements mean from a population's intent perspective. So this is the AI probably read 50,000 different documents on the back end right now and is now giving us a bucket of things we need to message on. Or not, because there's something, oh, sorry, that was my bad. I want the content, not the subject. I want the content that I need organized. Here we go. So it'll be very fast now. And then in what's called open world means it actually goes out and learns more on its own. So in an hour from now, it will be, close to a healthcare worker in terms of the understanding of the COVID situation and, what people are looking at. So if you click on open world, you release the beast. It sends out 100,000 web crawlers and it educates itself reading medical journals on websites, Wikipedia, anywhere where there's information. The crawlers themselves go on different search engines to find out where the resources are. So now we've got self-checking, one cluster here. We've got self-isolation and quarantine lockdown here. We've got the SARS Corona link and Wuhan. We've got info from the CDC. We've got masks. We've got sneezing and coughing, hand sanitizer, deaths and fatality. Director General is speaking about this and how Ebola, homelessness, which is big in South Africa. So doorknobs. So now you're realizing this becomes the messaging interface. I can put in Diet Coke and mix it with this. And who is drinking Diet Coke? What should I tell them about COVID? So there's no limit what this thing can learn in real time.
Phenomenal.
So we bolted it all together in one tech stack to basically become a reactive fusion center for everything Corona.
So backward tracking, forward tracking, and then messaging in real time. Yeah, sense making. So that's it. So I think Rinkin, what we can do is allow you to kind of absorb it and cogitate on it. And look, we can have a call a little bit later or tomorrow and talk about. In
truth, Ian, I don't think there is much time to cogitate. I think it's the time for action. I think a recording of this demonstration would be very helpful, just in terms of amplification of the message to people that I want to send it to.
No
problem. Having a live demo is an incredibly powerful thing, and I think that the key decision makers, it will be, in my view, a very important part of them deciding that this is the right product and the differentiated product. And obviously you will need to manage how you do that, given that you guys are busy building and refining this platform. But I'm sure in a company of your size, Ian, you and a couple of your top people will be able to do that. But it's a very, very compelling proposition, and I would like to get cracking to have the conversations to move people in government who are, as you know, even in times of crisis, sometimes slower than we would like in the commercial world.
Mm-hmm.
But if there are a couple of sound bites for me, it's very clear that your heritage in the commercial world, utilizing this data and successfully targeting campaigns for commercial organizations, puts you ahead of the pack in terms of how to approach this problem. So hats off, guys! You've done a fantastic thing here.
Yeah. Thank you. So look, we've signed a contract. We can get going. Rene and the team and myself are on standby. We could do demos relatively quickly. The good thing is that I think people are quite flexible these days on timing. We're very flexible, so we can support any number of live demos to the guys that matter in your world. So that will never be a problem.
That's wonderful. I'm very grateful to you for stepping up so quickly and for building what looks to be an incredible product, an incredible solution, I should say, actually.
Thank you. No, that's great.
You.
So look, we can keep talking on WhatsApp, or we can literally talk later tonight or early tomorrow. We can get going. It's wonderful, and thank you for your support and actually willing to go out and pitch this for us. I mean, that's one thing we don't have, is those tentacles that you have into the government. So we're just essentially a tech company that relies on people like yourself and partnerships to leverage our tech primarily in the commercial world, but now maybe some nice applications in the government. So thank you very much for agreeing to partner with us.
Not at all. It will be my pleasure. It will be my pleasure. Your product is so compelling that anybody would be a fool not to try and seize the opportunity.
Great.
Very cool.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody on the line. Thank you, SQREEM team, for dialing in and kind of learning more, and thank you for you guys in America. Really appreciate you guys dialing in at short notice and supporting us. And I think this is great. We'll make a difference, and we can solve some big problems. It's really exciting. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Rinkin, and we'll talk very soon. Bye-bye.
Absolutely.
Speak to you soon.
Guys.
Nice meeting you.
You.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.